And we're live.
Hello, ladies and
Excellent.
gentlemen, and welcome to a very special edition of Fans of Power. Very special in the sense we're talking about a specific kind of power this week. We're talking about fans of mutant power, and we've tried this once before, but I think it just builds up the anticipation that Larry Houston, director of the 1990s X-Men animated series and various other works with Marvel Animation, has graced us again with his presence to talk about his time on X-Men and other properties of superhero sorts. So, Larry, thank you again for taking time out of your schedule to join us to talk about this very beloved property.
I'm glad you guys invited me along, be a part of your show, and talk to fans who actually appreciated the show that almost never got.
Let's see. Well, I guess we could start out with by kind of addressing how you got introduced to the X-Men before we dig into your journey to the X-Men series. Like what started you on this path of this passion for the X-Men?
Well, for me, and kid back in the '60s, and I've always liked that concept. When I got a job in Lee, that Stan and a lot of us wanted to do was not only get Spider-Man and Hulk, but we wanted to get the X-Men. The only way we could do that, because the network wasn't interested in buying the show at the time, called Pride of the X-Men, where we got the financing together, and we got also the major company overseas called Toy Animation, the pilot. And
See, Larry, we're having
we
audio issues. Are you using your laptop or your phone?
the laptop. You want to use the phone?
It might be better if you use the phone because we're getting some audio glitches on your end.
Oh, okay. Let me. How do I just log off of here?
Just close off of that, and then just like we did before the other day with your phone.
Okay, let me do that right now.
Okay.
All right, we'll kill a little time while you're doing that with just a brief discussion. Tyler, you've had Larry on Fans of Power before, and we've talked about some of the stuff early on in his career about Masters of the Universe, and we'll retread some of that stuff for people who haven't seen that episode. But I don't think we'll cover everything that's in there, so there's still a reason for people to go back and check out that episode, because that's going to be Master specific.
Yes.
And we'll touch on a few of those things here, but not quite as much as back then. But so I mean, this is a guy with a lot of stuff, a lot of creative stuff, under his belt. Just off the top of your head, some of the different things, like he worked on G.I. Joe, Spider-Man, Thunder the Barbarian, Mr. T. Was there anything specific besides Masters of the Universe and the X-Men that you really liked and wanted to kind of focus on today when we have a chance to talk to him?
The G.I. Joe intro for the '87 movie, because I've been a big fan of G.I. Joe, and I always loved the movie regardless of its taking liberties with the backgrounds of Cobra and that to a much more science fiction type. But I still love the movie, and that intro, whether you like the movie or not, is beloved by all G.I. Joe fans, and Larry is responsible for that, and I believe the first 10 minutes of the film as well, at least animation wise, whether he storyboarded it or not. I'm not sure if he's responsible for the first 10 minutes. I do know that. So the sequences with
thing. Yeah, I was gonna say an interesting thing to talk about would be the way that they break up the duties when they do some of that stuff, because normally in your mind you think a movie, a director, one guy, one vision all the way through, working with special effects, working with the sound guy, working with whatever. But with animated movies, they always have these different crews in different places. And so that might be an interesting thing to talk about, the way they work together with the different, units and whatever. I'm going to send another invitation real quick to him just in case. And then he'll be able to, hopefully, to find that and get back through. So So, off the top of your head, thinking back to Masters of the Universe, what was his connection to Masters of the Universe?
He worked up. Well, there's Larry.
There.
All right,
Can
you all
you
right
see
there,
me
Larry?
now?
Yes.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's hot here. It's got a lot of. We got the air conditioning running in the background, and we're in the mid 80s out here.
Oh,
I don't know how hot that is to you, but it's hot to me.
Hey, man, when it hits 72 degrees, I have to have the air on. I don't like it any hotter than that.
I keep it cranked about 60 degrees in my place.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Is this any better?
Yeah. Actually, you're coming through a lot clearer, actually.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Just got to get used to holding this phone.
Okay. You
Or
got something you
leave it
can
up
prop
against
it on?
a-
That way you can keep your hands free?
Let me find it. Let me see if I can make this thing stand up by itself. Let's see.
This is always the fun stuff when you bring somebody on.
Oops. Stay
Got a
still.
little bit of wildlife there. You got some plants?
Yeah.
That'll work. That'll work.
Let's
Perfect.
see. There's some,
There we go.
okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Loud and clear. Perfectly clear.
Okay. Let me wipe this off again.
Anyway, drink plenty of water while we're talking to you here. Don't want you to dehydrate with all the sweat you're going through.
So, so briefly then, X-Men was a series that you thought would never be made.
That's correct. We tried to get the series off the ground way back in Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. When we tried to include it in a couple of episodes to try and get the networks to give them a sample of what was going on. And then we, at some point, the financing came through to put the show together, but for a pilot. And so what happened was it was myself, Will Mineo, and Rick Holberg, along with Margaret Lesh, who was the head of the studio at the time. We got the financing and we got Toei Animation on board to do the show. And so we got a chance to do the pilot. Now, the thing you should realize is that what we wanted to do in the pilot was the Sentinels. But the people who were financing the show said, no, we need to sell toys. So that's how come we had Magneto, we had the White Queen, we had the Block, we had all these action figures in the show. But okay, we said, fine, this is still part of the X-Men lore. We put it together and we put it out there for the pilot. And so we did that, and it still didn't sell. So it was kind of like we put our best foot forward, but it didn't work at the time. And so that kind of languished for about, I don't know, I'm not sure of the time period, maybe about 6 years. You know, you fast forward, and Margaret Lesh, who was before in charge of Marvel Productions, became the head of Fox Kids. And she was in charge of all the shows. And so at that point, she was able to greenlight the X-Men series, and that's how we got that first season off the ground.
now,
Yeah, I was going to say I was looking through the IMDb real quick here, and Spider-Man and the Amazing Friends was 81 to 83. Prior to the X-Men, didn't actually looks here like it didn't actually reach production until 89. So you had, at least 6 years there, and then the X-Men cartoon itself didn't come out until 92. So you had another, 3 years there. So it did take quite a long time to go through the process until you actually got, a show on the air. Which, it's weird because you always think about, pilot season at networks, and there's always like, 40 shows at this network, 30 shows at that network, and somebody was on a show, it got canceled, and 6 months later they're on another show, a new show, and something. And you just think about how quickly TV shows get turned around. But I guess animation requires a lot more work. It takes a lot more time than throwing a bunch of people on a set for a sitcom.
Yeah, we had a lot of perseverance because we really believed in the show, and so did Margaret, which is like, that was key to have that executive in charge who believed in the show. And after Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, what kept the studio going, because I was there for like 9 years, is that we started doing every Hasbro toy in the world as a TV show. We did the Transformers, we did G.I. Joe, we did Bigfoot, we did Inhumanoids, we did so many action adventure shows after Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. They kept the studio going for up until 89, 88, 89, and that's when everything went south. And Hasbro decided, well, we're not going to do this cartoon stuff anymore. And so they stopped. And then the studio basically collapsed after that and went away.
Now, with the two appearances in the X-Men, I believe it appeared one time in a Submariner cartoon, I think probably back in the 60s, I think.
Oh, yeah.
One appearance, which I had that VHS as a child, and I thought that was really, really cool. But the two appearances in the Amazing Friends show, looking back, and of course at the time, what is your, viewpoint when those are going into production? The Firestar Was Born and the X-Men Adventure, as of like, these are two opportunities to get the X-Men into the eyes of children and the network executives. What is going on in to make sure that these opportunities are like the best that can be put forward to help get them noticed?
Well, at the time when those shows were coming out, myself and Rick Kohlberg and Will, we would talk to the writers about that and we tried to steer them in the direction toward include the X-Men in this little adventure, just so we can try and keep showcasing the show. And so it was kind of a coordinated, Machiavellian effort on our part to try and keep it in the public eye and keep it in the network's purviews, just so they can see, the value of the storytelling of these characters. And so, yeah, we kind of did that on purpose. And whenever the shows came, whenever we, like the show with, I think it's Firestar, when we did It's Born, I think it's the origin, and I made sure that I got Act 3. I wanted to do the action part of the show. I think Will did the beginning. No, I'm sorry. Rick Kohlberg did the beginning, and then I think it was Will Meniel and then myself. We were really the trio that tried to get the show on the air all the time, and we were all fans of the X-Men and big fans of Captain America, both of those two characters.
And that's a memorable episode, the Firestar episode, too, because of the Juggernaut sequences, throughout the episode. And Wolverine's, I think his first appearance in animation form, I believe, was in the Firestar Was Born. And obviously the link from that one to Pride is the choice to make Wolverine Australian.
Oh, God, that's our...
You
will never get over that.
I had my buddy Matt Hilton as a child told me, no, he's Canadian. He doesn't talk like that in the cartoons. Like, oh, okay. Which at the time I thought was perfectly fine. I didn't question even when I found out. But that was something that I there's been rumors about the reasons why. Can you shed a little light on why Wolverine's first few appearances were he was an Aussie?
Back then, there's a whole series of events that happened back then, but the main thing was Crocodile Dundee was a big movie back then, and the network felt that having an Aussie would be good for him to have that accent, and we were like, we kind of gave in because we didn't want to fight the networks, because we just wanted to get this thing on the air just so people can see it, and we figured, okay, we'll bite the bullet. We'll make an Aussie just for this episode, but if we can get a series going, we'll change the voice back to what it should be. So it was a unfortunate compromise. And at the time, on those shows, the three of us were not the directors. We were all the storyboard artists, but we still had the ear of Margaret, the owner of the president of the studio, and so. We really didn't have the gravitas to really shake the tree, so to speak. So we just kind of went along with it, grit our teeth, and going, okay, get a good X-Men show out of this as much as we could.
One of the things that really has been an issue for Marvel for the last 15, 20 years, however long it's been, has been the rights being mixed up all over the place. And so you've got a whole Marvel universe of movies with no X-Men in it. You've got an X-Men universe with no Captain America or Iron Man or anybody else. But it sounds like back in those days, because you were doing Spider-Man and you wanted to do the X-Men, you could just throw them in there. Were there any restrictions on characters you could use, or was it just pretty much as long as it's in a Marvel comic, you can put it in a Marvel show?
Kind of yes and no. Back then, the X-Men wasn't a big deal, so nobody thought much about it. And so that's how come we could include it into the Spider-Man show. Because back then, Marvel's, the way they conducted business, they really didn't have a lot of faith in the animated shows. They made their money off of licensing fees. And so they really weren't concerned about the content. They just wanted to make the money for licensing the shows. And I guess they had a contract so that, they could have Marvel characters, but they didn't have any inherent ownership if it appeared in the show back then. I think that answers the question.
Yeah. Well, then, were there any storylines or characters that you tried to use that like obviously you said before you wanted to focus more on Sentinels and they made you do Brotherhood of Mutants and Magneto, but was there anything that they said, hey, don't do anything that's like the Frank Miller stuff, try to keep it, family friendly, drop a lot of stuff with the Hellfire Club, don't use the name Hellfire Club, did they give you a lot of restrictions like that, or did you pretty much just know it's got to be a family friendly thing, so we're just going to keep it a certain way?
We're pretty much, I don't know if it's going to surprise you, but actually the people, when we did the first X-Men series, had no damn idea what the hell they were. They had no idea what a mutant was. They had no idea of anything you just said would be like talking Japanese to them. They had no idea what you just said. So they actually had, Margaret, I found out later after the fact that Margaret actually, her job was on the line for greenlighting the X-Men because nobody believed in the project, but she believed in it. And so pretty much when the show got on the air, pretty much when production started on the show, there was no micromanagement of the show because they didn't understand. They had no idea of the mythology of who were slated to who's the brother, who's the sister. They were, had no interest in it also. But the people like myself, Will Mineo, and Rick, and some of the writers, I'm trying to remember, story editors were Eric and Julia Lewall and Bob Skier, and we had knowledge of the X-Men mythology, who's really, the good guys, bad guys, and the relationships. We brought that to the table. We would talk about that amongst ourselves, and we put together the stories for the first season the way we wanted to do it. Will Mineo and Eric Lewall ran a lot of football. I can't the football analogies. They ran a lot of plays to try and minimize New York's involvement in terms of creative, getting involved with creative, and just let us do what we had to do. And we pretty much, most of the time, see, back then you got to also remember that in the 90s, a lot of shows only lasted 13 episodes, and they were gone. And so we kind of plotted out where we wanted to go for 13 episodes. And we were gonna go out in a blaze of glory saying, like, if we can only do one season, we're gonna make it the best we can, and we just put it out there. And that there's more details that Will knows that I don't remember right now, but that's how come in the first 13 we did the Sentinels, because that's what we wanted to do in Friday the X-Men. So that's actually the story we wanted to do first, and that's how come that's where they came from. We had a lot of fun with the Sentinels, which we were trying to tell them these would be fun toys, guys, but they didn't, they were more interested in like 3 or 4 or 5 or 8 action figures as opposed to one giant robot.
Now, I guess with the toy issue that you dealt with Pride of the X-Men, I'm assuming that was the line of toys that Toy Biz had put out around that time frame that had Magneto, Apocalypse, Sabretooth, Wolverine, Colossus, and Storm, and so forth. Is that the toy line that was pretty much, because I think that came out around 1989, I think. Is that the toy line that Toy Biz was pushing for, in correlation with Pride of the X-Men at the time? Or was
no, that was another toy company. I can't remember the name, but that was a totally separate one. Toy Biz came in partnership with the '92 version. And unfortunately, I can't remember the name of the toy company back then. But yeah, it's two separate toy companies.
Okay. Well, before we head in, I had one question to ask you about the infamous arcade game that seems to be quite based on the Pride of the X-Men pilot because of all the designs of all the all the heroes look. I mean, from Dazzler to Wolverine, all look like they just jumped right off the cartoon into this machine. All the villains that are featured in that, would they have been planned for the series had it been picked up? You know, like Nimrod and a lot of the various Wendigo, because a lot of the villains like Juggernaut, Blob, Pyro, and White Queen all show up in the game. And I've often wondered, had the series gone on, is this what we would have seen?
Oh God, that's a good question. I'm not sure exactly what year the game. When did the game come out? What year did it come out? Do you remember?
I want to say 89 or 90 because I don't know most of my childhood without that game. And I noticed the X-Men pilot on the Marvel Action Universe, which I watched, I think, from 88 to 89, which I know that's when that pilot was played between Amazing Friends and Dino Riders and stuff. So I have to assume it came out around that time. So the game
came out in '92. But to come out in '92, it would have had to have been in production a little bit longer before that, yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, it's you're talking the one that's like the 4-player Konami arcade game?
Yeah, that has like Dazzler, Storm, Colossus, Nightcrawler in it.
Yep, that's '92.
92, wow.
Wow.
Okay, yeah.
That's about the same year we did the show.
I was going to say the Wikipedia page says character designs of the X-Men and supervillains are based off the 1989 X-Men pilot episode, X-Men Pride of the X-Men.
Oh, okay. Well, I know that, Marvel that was their character. They had those assets existed, so they could use it any way they wanted to.
Wow, so you guys had no input, I guess? Like they didn't go to you all since you all did do Pride of the X-Men and like they're going to use these designs for the game? Did you guys have any knowledge of that, I guess, or?
We had no knowledge. I mean, we were like the orphan kids, we did the Pride of the X-Men and it didn't sell, so they were like out of sight, out of mind. We were like nowhere near it anywhere. And so we didn't get involved with the X-Men, wait until like 92, 91 to be brought back in to do the next show. No, we were like invisible to them back then, except for the executive, Margaret Lesh. We were pretty, we weren't there.
So how much of a lead time then is there from when you're told, okay, we're going to go do the show, so then you sit down, start working on the show, you hand it off to animators, and then it finally gets on TV? Like, how long is that process?
That process runs about 9 months to get one episode done, and then it's staggered every week or 2 weeks to get the next show done. So yeah, basically the show that you saw in '92, actually we started production the year before in order to get it on the air. The writing had to get done and the pre-production and production overseas. It's a 9-month process just to get one episode out. And so we started that way back in '91, '92.
So then how did word finally come down that the show was going to be over? Was the show doing well? Did it seem like it was fine? Was it a surprise that it ended, or was it a surprise that it lasted 3 years?
It was, I wasn't there. I was there. The X-Men was on the air for 5 years. I was there for the first 4. And at the end of the first year, we basically had people working on. We had our resumes out. We were getting ready to find some more work because we didn't know what was going to happen. Everything back then was only 13 episodes, and it was when we were in post production, adding the sound and music to the episodes, that suddenly said, "We got to pick up another 13," and everybody's going, "What? Really? Oh, good, great!" And so, the last episode of, I think it's 13, when Scott and Gina sitting on a blanket. We ended. I drew that part, and it was like Scott and Jean talking about getting married, what will the future hold for our kids, and it ended on the blanket. They're on the blanket. You see the sunset in the background, and that was the end of the episode. And then suddenly, when they said we had a pickup, they had to go back into post and and create a new ending where they moved scenes around and then added a voiceover and used added computer graphics to make it seem like Sinister was going to be coming around.
Yeah.
But that was done way after all the animation was done. It was like it was added at the last minute.
That is really cool. Because to watch that as a kid, that was a big deal. And of course, as a child, you're not sure when new episodes are coming on. You just, it's just kind of like blind luck that you find out. So that was a big deal to see that, because I didn't know a whole lot about him other than it was I think through trading cards and the action figures and things
Right.
like that. So not a whole lot, but I just knew he was a cool looking character, and that's really cool that ending was thrown in as a last minute, to tie in the next season, which was going to bring in Sinister and the Nasty Boys,
Right.
into the mythology. So that's very, very cool. And I had often wondered too, prior to you saying this, that when I got a little bit older, I used to wonder why so many big storylines and characters had shown up in the first season. I mean, within the first few episodes, we're given Cable, we're given Juggernaut and Colossus, Apocalypse and the Four Horsemen, Warren's transformation to the Archangel, Days of Future Past. A lot of stuff is packed in. I mean, a lot of big events and characters are introduced in that, and cameos of like Sunfire, show up. So that's all due to the logic of thinking this is all we've got, so let's just throw in everything in the kitchen sink.
That's it. We figured we didn't have we had a guaranteed 13. We didn't have a guarantee beyond that, so we just said, okay, let's do the best we can with these 13 episodes. And things that you did, like you mentioned, Sunfire. None of those cameos are written into the show. Those are stuff that I made up. There was one episode with oh god, I can't remember the name, but a lot of the mutants were being slaves on Genosha.
Slave Island. That's the name of the episode. Yeah.
Slave Island, yeah. And a lot of the writers had no idea who the X-Men were, and so they would write things like Mutant 1, 2, 3, 4. And so I got the idea. I asked them, okay, is this a male or female voice? Tell me who it is. And once I found that out, I had told my staff, okay, make this one Blob, make this Mystique, make this Sunfire. I assign real Marvel characters to those names that they had in the script, and I even made up some more extra ones they didn't know about. But I added all that into the shows that wasn't in the script, because I knew as a kid I would get real excited if I saw, other characters other than the X-Men making their cameos or Easter eggs, they should call it today, in the show. I'm showing my age, but back in the 60s, Marvel Comics wasn't very well distributed, and DC controlled all the distribution. And so what Stan did in order to promote the books is that you'd be in a Spider-Man book and you'd see Thor go through it, and then he, at the bottom, Stan would have this little caption saying, if you want to see where Thor is going, pick up, Tales of Journey to Mystery, whatever it was. He would add these little things at the bottom to cross-promote the books, but what he did was create a connected universe. And I remember seeing that I remember that thrill of reading it in the books, that, wow, these guys are all in the same world. And so when I got on the X-Men, I decided that's what I wanted to do. So I didn't ask permission, which I probably, if I had asked for permission, that would have never happened. And so I just did it. I said, fine, you want to fire me? I don't care. I'm going to make the show I want to make and make it the best that I can make it. And so that's where those characters came from.
Does that include, there's a quick shot of Ghost Rider in the series. There's a reference to the Punisher in the series. Are you responsible for those two?
Yep. Guilt is charged.
That is so cool. I mean, as a kid to see that, and same thing for Firestar was born when in that flashback sequence of seeing the Sentinel and Magneto. I mean, it's just like the fists are pumping. And you're just so excited to see just a quick shot that, oh my God, they fought the Sentinels, they fought Magneto in that. So in this series, it was so epic, and to see Blob and Pyro and Avalanche all show up, Mystique shows up. And I remember when the Night of the Sentinels came on, at least in my era, they played that pilot for what seemed like several Saturdays in a row. And me and my brother just waiting and waiting for a new episode, thinking this is going to be the one where Magneto shows up. So when that episode finally, Enter Magneto, airs, I mean, it was just so exciting to see Magneto burst onto the scene in Enter Magneto for the first time. Right. It was that's what I wanted to ask you. Was there a deliberate gap when Night of the Sentinels airs? Was there a delay in releasing the rest of the 13 episodes?
Oh yeah, that was a involuntary reason that happened. The overseas company we had been working with they were notorious for trying to create production delays so they wouldn't have to do everything that was asked of them, and so they would sometimes turn in quality that wasn't up to, it didn't meet our quality standards. And so he did the same thing with the X-Men, but this time, because Margaret Lesh was in charge of the networks, we complained to her, she complained to him and said, look, you're going to do everything that's required of you, and you're going to do it right. And so the show that should have aired in September, she actually delayed the show. She forced them to do all the changes. It's called retakes. When someone doesn't do something right, you got to send it back and have the scene redone. And a lot of times in production, they try and hold the show back as long as they can, then ship it to you, knowing that you have an air date that will force you not to ask for all the retakes you required. You got to go in post production and try and fix stuff, or then you get all these mistakes and crap happen, and that's what happened back then in the 90s and 80s. And so Margaret told them and forced them to do it right. And so that's why you only had one episode in October 31st, I think, and then another one in November somewhere. But she was forcing them to do it right, and that's why it didn't debut. Wait until January, because she wanted the show done right. And like I said, I didn't know it at the time, but her job was on the line for putting the X-Men on the air, which nobody believed in. And so the part of the benefit of the X-Men at the time, when it came out in January, was that all of the other shows had shown all of their 13 episodes were all, they were into reruns at that time. And when the X-Men came out in January, we were all brand new. So all the kids' eyeballs went right to Fox to watching the X-Men, and we actually benefited from that delay because now we had no competition. And so our story, we grabbed the kids' imaginations, and the ratings went through the roof. And between the X-Men, Batman, and Power Rangers, it shot Fox to kids into being the #1 kids network back then.
A couple questions. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, bud.
I was going to say, I have a couple questions from YouTube real quick. First of all, the geek reviews. When you were talking about sneaking some of the characters in just to have a reference or have them appear, does this mean that there was no possibility of ever doing something like a Secret Wars or some sort of giant, Marvel Universe crossover?
Oh, you mean back then?
Yeah.
No, the secret, we had discussed that, but we needed to get through. We needed to establish the characters first and the universe before expanding it to that large of a roster. That's why I think we did it in season 5. When they did Bishop and the Axis of Time or something like that. That's when they felt that they could expand all these characters once the regular characters were established. That's also a reason why we only had so many X-Men, because we had the writers felt they can only write a certain amount of dramatics and relationships, and that's why I think it was down to 8 characters, 4 women and 4 guys, in order for them to try. So it wasn't so unwieldy. The writer, you only had like 24 minutes to tell a story. And one of the things we had, I was a veteran of from back in the 80s, until 92 is that as we had to get millions and millions of people to enjoy the show, not just the fan base. The fan base is excellent, and you need that always. But if we don't get the millions of people, the show dies in 13 episodes or less. Sometimes there have been even occasions where they would pull the show halfway in the middle and just kill it. And so I should say we, I mean myself, Eric Lewald, Julia, and other people, we all felt, okay, let's just try and get through the basic mythologies, and we kind of like said, okay, we're gonna start here in the storyline of the X-Men and just try and catch up to what was being done in the 90s, and at some point, that's when we got to the Phoenix Saga and everything else. We were trying to catch up to what was being done in the books at the time, and so that was part of the logic we used in that. Let's see, what else can I remember about that? It was, yeah, I guess that's it. I guess that's pretty much why we didn't do the Secret Wars yet, because we had to catch up. Oh, the other thing, yeah, the only rule that I just remembered that Margaret told us is that every episode had to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, so that when someone watched the show, they felt like they got an entire story. But she said, if you want to do a B storyline, a C storyline, a D storyline, that's fine. You can toss that in there. So it's like you have connective tissue between episodes that felt like they were connected in some way. But she said we had to give the viewer a complete experience of watching a show, a story. Sorry.
Is that kind of like referencing like when Professor X and Magneto are pretty much stranded in the Savage Land, and for what seems like so many episodes, because you're watching them only on Saturday morning, so a week to week, you're seeing
Right.
what's going on with those guys, but then you've got the main storyline going on with the rest of the team, going through various missions and fighting villains here and there.
Yes, exactly, and that's why the exception was if you created an episode that was like part 1 and part 2, that was fine. But other than that, yeah, we had to. That was the only restriction she gave us, and it worked, I think, because it helped bring in new viewers who had no idea who the X-Men were, and they could actually have a whole experience of watching what went down, and it helped. I'm going to have to plug my phone in. I'm running out of power here.
Please
Hold on
do.
a second. Okay. Okay. All right. Looks like. Hold on a second. Okay. Am I back?
Yes.
Yeah, we still hear you. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I got it plugged in so it won't run out of power now. Although I lost your pictures.
Oh, you're back. You're back.
Yeah, yours blinked out for a second, but after a few seconds, it came back.
Okay. Yeah. Do I see you?
Just give it. I can see you, so give it a few seconds and it may pop back. Yeah.
Okay. What's going on here?
Here's a question from YouTube. Drawing by Hand wants to ask: were there any episodes that were cut on TV?
Were there any? No, except for maybe one sequence way in season 4. No, everything pretty much was there.
So then, what was cut? I mean, that's a good follow-up question.
Oh, there was a sequence in. God, let's see. It was a sequence in where Sinister is in the Savage Land, and he has these belts that allow his characters to keep their mutant powers, and everybody else lost theirs. And I drew this. I made up the sequence where. Oh God, what's I forgot the guy. Why am I forgetting his name? Oh, the shapeshifter. I'm showing my age here. Help me out, guys. What's his?
Mystique?
Huh?
You're not talking about Mystique, are you?
I'm talking about the shapeshifter on the X-Men.
Oh, Morph.
Good Lord, how did I forget?
Yeah.
He was such a great character. Yeah, Morph. I had Morph because he had the belt on. I had him shift and fight the Sinister and his little fighters, but it ran long, so that sequence got cut out, so you guys never saw it. So other than that, everything else pretty much is in. Everything I put in there was in. And the one thing I used to do, because I knew we only had so many minutes in a show, when you look at the whole series, I tried to cut out, it's going to sound trivial, but I tried to cut out walking as much as I could. Because believe it or not, walking sometimes is a lot of work for the animators to do group shots of people walking across the screen. And it just kind of almost wastes time unless it's a specific scene, like it's moody and you got shadows and you have long shot, where you're setting up a scene. Most of the time I just would have the guy say, let's go, and we wipe and we're there. Or I'd have either wipe or just cut to one guy on a close-up saying, let's go here, go there, and just eliminate the walking. If you watch the series, the characters never really walked a lot. They either flew or I just cut away, unless it was a specific scene. And what that did was it allowed more time for the script that the writers wrote to play out, and it also allowed us to add mood and pacing for the show to make the show more enjoyable. So it wasn't running at 90 miles an hour every damn second. You had time for the story to breathe, for the show to breathe. And that's a minor thing on my part, because that's something I learned from back in the 80s to 90s. It's an experience as a director. You learn how to pace yourself and pace the story. But like there's a character called Sinister that has he's got this rib costume, he's got this rooster tail cape. And you could kill an animator by trying to make that guy turn and walk, because there's so many damn lines on him. So I made the decision when the storyboards came in, I would alter the boards so that he didn't move, or he maybe just had a head turn. He would be talking, then you cut to whoever he's talking to. Then when you cut back, he's already in a different place or a different pose. And then when you saw him coming, I tried to keep him coming in and out of shadow, and try and do it on a close-up so that he looked more like Dracula coming in and out of the shadows. And again, actually, by accident, it gave him more of a style, that this was like a mysterious character. But the main thing was, like, I was trying to save animators' lives so they wouldn't be dying at nighttime drawing all those damn lines. That way, when you don't have a lot of movement, the animators and the artists can actually draw good drawings and not have to worry about, oh God, I got to in between this, So those are little things that I did in production to help, and so that we got more story into the show than most shows did at that time.
Now, a quick follow-up question about Sinister. When he's brought into the X-Men books, he's got a particular group of villains, which I don't believe were referred to as like the Nasty Boys, whereas like in the cartoon, he's got a brand new group of villains. What was the logic of, because I think Sabretooth was a part of his little faction that he put together, just as an example. What was the idea of creating like a whole new group of evil mutant villains, as opposed to bringing in characters that were used in the comic books?
I think the characters that he had, we got those from the books. We didn't make those up.
That's my mistake. And X-Men fans, I apologize for that. I was thinking that I guess I certainly don't know all of his appearances, so I apologize for that. I was thinking that they were made for the cartoon. My mistake.
Yeah, no, and what we tried to do all the time was that, at least on my end, we tried not to create anything new, because there's such a huge amount of X-Men characters out there. There's actually no need to create something new. And I did my best never to create anything new. I think I created one new character because Marvel back east didn't have a design. And it was something, I think it was the episode with Gambit, where he went back to his people, and it had a character they call the External. And at the time, I was requesting from New York, I need a model of this character. Who is this character? It was all brand new. They were creating the mythology as they went along. They had nothing. And I'm in production. I got to get the sucker out to about, 14 different people this week. And so I can't really wait on you guys. So I waited for them, and they had nothing. So I went ahead and created a character. And I based her costume loosely on Hela, the goddess of death from the Thor series. And since it was being done, he was going back to Cajun country. I made her a Creole character, and that's the only character I think I made up for the series. Other than that, I think my friend, the director who came after me, Frank Squilacci, he created his own little Italian superhero character in the background in another episode. But other than that, we just try to stick to existing mutant characters that already existed. I can't see you guys. I hope you can see me.
We can't. We just see your image.
Oh, we can't see my.
Yeah, we can't actually. At the moment, we just see your
thumbnail.
Oh, the little image guy. Yeah, I don't know what happened. Is that okay?
Yeah, it's okay.
Is that okay?
It just happens sometimes because, and then now your video just popped back up, so I can see you again. It's just network.
Oh, there you are.
Network issues happen sometimes. There's nothing you can really do about it. All right, 2 questions from YouTube. This is from the Geek Reviews. Was there ever a chance we might have seen Howard the Duck?
We did see him on a T-shirt of I think
Beast was wearing it too, wasn't he? Yeah, Beast was the T-shirt. Yes.
Yeah, that was done by when Frank Bruner was he was the character designer on the show. When we needed to give Beast a shirt. He was going to be walking out in public, so he came up with that idea and drew Howard the Duck on the shirt. That was his idea. It was when I saw it, I went, "Yeah, that's cool. Put that through."
All right. So then, second question. The X-Men have been drawn by a number of different artists over the years. When John Byrne draws the X-Men, they look a little different from when Jim Lee draws the X-Men, from when Walt Sportaccio draws the X-Men. So when it came to putting together the show, and you're defining a style and you're defining the look of the characters, were you involved in that process of this is how the costume is going to look, this is how tall they are, this is going to be the shape of their eyes? Getting that definitive look of the character to make that, what do you call it, like the character Bible to send to the animators so they know, so everybody, when the animators draw them, they all draw them exactly the same way. Were you part of that process of distilling the characters together and how they would look on the show?
Yeah, basically in the first season, it was the people that were involved was Marvel back east, but the final determination of what it was going to look like was Will Mineo, myself, Rick Holberg, and Fox Kids. That's actually where the finalization of the look we wanted to do. I mean, and we decided at that point we wanted to do Jim Lee. Now there's a little backstory behind that, because at that time, for some reason there was some politics going on, and they didn't think we should do the X-Men with the Jim Lee style, which is like, that was the cornerstone of the look we were going for. And so Will showed them, okay, look, if you want a different look, he gave him an example of another look. And basically, if you can imagine the X-Men as Scooby-Doo, he gave him that look. Because he said, look, if you don't want this, what about this? And it was such a shock to the system, they backed off and allowed us to do the show we wanted to do. But they was like Professor X, drawn Scooby-Doo style, a Scooby-Doo van with a Scooby-Doo antenna. He's in a wheelchair with a senile dog, looking for mutants around town, that kind of stuff. And, thank God they didn't bite, because we would have been horrified if they had actually went with that.
Was that deliberate, though, to make it look I mean, very reminiscent of Scooby Doo, hoping that they would get the idea, or was it just,
No, it was deliberate. We wanted to shock the system. Part of one of the things you do that would happen in animation back then was that you kind of drew. It's kind of like this drawing six fingers. You draw something that's so off the wall, something out of place, that it draws their attention to it, and they say, "Oh no, we don't want that. We don't want that." And then they back off and allow you to actually do what makes sense, as opposed to some crazy idea that they wanted to do. So, no, that was deliberate on Will's part, and he was successful in making them back off so we could do the show we wanted to do. But yeah, so it's all politics. It's the kind of stuff that happens behind the scenes that most people don't know about. That it's exhausting. Let me tell you, when you're dealing with stuff like that,
Please tell me that artwork still exists.
It probably does, but Will Mineo has it. I don't.
Oh man, we gotta find that. We gotta find that. I desperately
we
want
need
see
to have
that.
access to that. Yeah, we have to see just how far it could have gone. Oh Lord.
Yeah, you just imagine Scooby Doo, then you're right there.
All right. Well,
go ahead, Doug.
Well, I just want to take a step back for a minute. Working on X-Men is obviously the focus of what we're here to talk about today.
Your voice is breaking up.
Well, can you give us a little bit of background on how you got into animation and how you got to the point that you were working on all these shows, doing artwork, doing the character designs, the storyboarding, and all of that kind of stuff?
My background starts way back in the 70s, where Will Mineo and myself, we were all drawing our own little fanzines. We got to know each other through the snail mail back then. And later on, Will went to Hanna-Barbera, and eventually we both ended up at a studio called Filmation Studios, and that's how I got into the business. And when I left Filmation, I went to work for Marvel Productions and working with Stan on Spider-Man. Well, actually, it was a syndicated Spider-Man. I was working with Art Fratello, the director at the time.
Is that the solo Spider-Man series?
I'm sorry?
The solo Spider-Man series where it's just Spider-Man on his own?
Correct.
Yes.
And the series needed, I think, 26 episodes to finish off they always did 65 episodes back then. So I was brought in to help finish out what they needed. And so I worked, that's how I got into Marvel Productions. And then I was there when they started doing the Spider-Man's Amazing Friends, working for a director named Don Jurwich. And we did that for a couple of years, I think 3 years. I got a chance to work with John Buscema. Stan talked him into coming out for a couple of weeks, and that was really a thrill to actually go to lunch and talk to John about the business, and watching him draw. Every time he would throw stuff away that he didn't like, we were all raiding his trash can, because it was like what he discards is like fantastic. So, well, anyway, after Spider-Man, I think that's when all of the syndicated stuff started taking off. The G.I. Joe miniseries, the G.I. Joe series, the Transformers, then they had Inhumanoids and Bigfoot and Glow Friends, My Little Pony. I mean, we were like, there was so much coming through that studio. They actually had to rent 2 other buildings to take care of all the work that we were doing. So it was really filled to the rafters with artists and writers, and we were doing a lot of work back in the 80s. Sorry, and one of the shots we got in there was to do the pilot for the Pride of the X-Men, and so that was like interspersed in between that and Defenders of the Earth, and what's another one out there?
Work on Dino Riders.
And Dino Riders, yes, Dino Riders is out there too. So we did. There was so much work I couldn't remember all the shows we were working.
The Robocop animated series too.
Yep, worked on that also. Now, for me, I got a chance when I was working on the GI Joe series, I got a chance to write one of the episodes called Hearts and Cannon, and one of the directors left, and so they had an opening. So I got promoted to being a director on the GI Joe series, and so that was a lot of fun to actually be in charge and actually make the decisions that I've always, I always had to negotiate before with the director, but now that I was a director, I could make the decisions unilaterally, to a degree, and that was when I started becoming a director on different shows and started my career that way. Because after I left, after Marvel did a crash and burn, and I left, worked for Deke on their Cop series as a storyboard artist, but then I got another shot. Yeah, and then I got a shot to work as a director on. I think it was. I'm not sure if this is what's first, but I did. I was a piece of director on Karate Kid.
Yep.
And then I got a chance to work on. Oh God, what's the other one? I just lost. Oh, Captain Planet with Will Mineo. I was one of the first director working with Will on that show. And then sometime after that, after doing some just being an artist, sometime after that, that's when we got the call that Margaret wanted to do the X-Men series for Fox Kids. And then that's how that one thing led to another, and that's how I got to that point.
Now, before we move on, you just open up a large barrel of other possible questions. Just by naming that you were on G.I. Joe, let alone all the other shows you worked on. Like, just for curiosity's sake, how much do you remember working on, as a director on G.I. Joe, working on Karate Kid, Captain Planet, and Robocop, and so on and so forth?
I know that I worked on it. I mean, I can't remember everything about it, but I do remember working on those series, and it was a lot of fun. G.I. Joe was a lot of fun because at the time, working on network shows, you really couldn't do traditional action shows where the good guy punches the bad guy. They wouldn't allow that on network Saturday morning. But once we got to do syndicated shows, we were able to do G.I. Joe, punching out Cobra, throwing people through glass. You could do just normal action shots, and it was like having the chains taken off of your arms. You could actually just do a regular action show, and it was like thrilling to do that. So it was a lot of fun, We still knew that eventually these shows might be shown on the network, so we couldn't go crazy, like when the G.I. Joes. I'm sorry, when the Cobra planes would get blown up, you'd show people parachuting out.
Jumping with parachutes every single time. It was like clockwork. Even as a kid, you're waiting for them to fall with a parachute. Maybe on occasion you'd see one, oh man, I didn't see a parachute on that guy. He probably hit the ground.
Yeah. And the good guy, the G.I. Joe and Cobra couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. They shoot at each other with red and blue lasers, and nobody ever got hit. But it was kind of like 18, action where things happen but nobody got hurt. It was kind of like, it's Saturday morning, so it's kind of Saturday morning violence, but at least we could punch someone.
I never dwelt on that though as a kid. When I was watched especially G.I. Joe and seeing that damage would be done to everything but the people running around, and I just bought into it that they're all great shots, but they're also quick at moving out of the range of all these blue and red lasers. So stuff like that never really bothered me until as an adult and people are tearing apart Star Wars with stormtroopers and bad accuracy and stuff like that. So,
yeah, we knew the audience we were drawing and writing these stories for, so we kind of let that go. We didn't make it a big deal out of it. In most cases, it's kind of like that wasn't the fun of it. The fun of it was the other stuff, not that people got damaged and hurt and got shot.
Right, we have to do like a separate podcast just for that.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's a couple people in the YouTube chat right now, and they're basically asking the same question. Everybody, I guess this is the burning question for Larry Houston. Did you work on the anti-drug episode of Captain Planet?
Oh, wow. I forgot about that one. It was a while ago. I can't say if I did or not. I don't know what season it was. I worked on the first season of Captain Planet, but there were like 4 other seasons after me, and I don't know if I worked on that one or not. So I can't say that with definitive. If someone knows what year it came out, I could probably tell you if I worked on it. We did a lot of episodes dealing with ecology. Some of them with killing of rare animals and stuff like that, endangered animals, I should say. But I might have, but I can't say definitively unless I look at if it's in the first season of the series.
Yeah, they think it was season 2, so
it might. Yeah, that might have been another director because I was only on it for the first season.
Although when you're working on a series like that, you did. It says, according to Internet Movie Database, so depending on how accurate that is, you did 39 episodes in that season. So I guess were there times that you would just sit and just crank out a whole bunch of concepts to get to later, and then when you would leave the show, you would just pass them on to somebody else there and say, here, maybe you want to do something to them? Or was it more like when you're gone, you're just like, this is all mine, and you take it with you and leave?
No, what would happen was that we would have story meetings with the story editors. Turner had his own pre-production crew of writers that were really deep into ecology and stuff, and so there would be maybe brief discussions with us, but pretty much all of that was handled by them, and we pretty much got what they gave us. We had there was a back and forth, but basically they dictated everything because they were paying for everything. The Turner people were for that series. That was pretty much all financed by Turner himself. That was his baby of a concept, and so we would get the scripts and work on them and do it. But I didn't have control over that. That was Ted Turner.
Now, would you be willing to do another podcast discussing a lot of these various other works? Just so I can. There's just so many other questions I could ask, and I know we're here to talk about X-Men, but I just feel like with fans freaking out about Captain Planet and stuff, is that something you'd be willing to do in the near future?
Sure, I wouldn't mind doing it at all.
You hear that here, people? He will come back and talk about these other works here too, because I got burning questions about G.I. Joe and so forth too. I'd love to ask you about it as well.
Then let me circle it back to X-Men then.
Yeah.
When you're working on something like a Captain Planet or something that's more of an original work, and then you're working on something like X-Men where you're pulling from Marvel, does it really make a difference? Do you prefer one way or another where you get to be more original and come up with stuff? Or is it more fun to take the stuff that's been done in another format and modify it, rework it in order to put it onto the show?
We're talking about just the X-Men now, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, the idea of like when you take something like X-Men, is it more fun to take those characters that you've seen in the comics and adapt them to TV, or is it more fun to work on something like Captain Planet where you're just making the stuff up original out of your own mind as you go?
For me, I had more fun, I think, because I had a personal connection with the X-Men, because I grew up with this since I was a kid. I was in elementary school, watching that stuff. Captain Planet was working from a character without any mythology. The fun part of that is that you can, your imagination is open. You can do anything you want. I guess for me, the preference, I like working with established characters. But the Captain Planet, my creativity on Captain Planet was limited to what was provided to me by the Turner people, and it was such an amorphous concept back then. There's no backstory. There's no real backstory. There's no real relationships. There's no real something you can sink your teeth into in terms of what motivates the character. I like knowing that, because when I'm asking, either when I'm drawing or when someone else is drawing the stories, I like to give them some context of like, oh, this character's like, a brother or sister to this character, and it's like Clint Eastwood, or this is like another actor. Try and give them points of reference so that when they're drawing the stuff, they can figure out how best to stage the character and then pose the character to the personalities involved. It gives you something to work with as an artist when you're storyboarding a show. And the Captain Planet is pretty much wide open. You're working from a blank slate, blank slate, and so it's a little bit harder to get the underlying subtext into the show. But because nothing's there, you can just do almost anything you want, and what you do will define the character. So there are people who would prefer that method, and I prefer the latter, which is working from something I already know exists, and I can figure out how to work the subtext into the show.
Now, a very pivotal point about the X-Men series, and obviously is still celebrated, even touched upon apparently in the production of especially the first X-Men film, is Wolverine's portrayal in this particular series. Voiced by Cal Dodd. Now, Wolverine obviously is a very savage character. He drinks, he smokes cigars. He's pretty blunt about things. How is it? I mean, how was the process of bringing Wolverine to this to a Saturday morning cartoon, maintaining the very distinct personality, but also making sure that we like if he fights Sabretooth, we can't show blood, we can't show wounds and stuff like that. Was it difficult to portray Wolverine with kind of eliminating the drinking, the smoking, and the slashing of human beings? Obviously, with Sentinels, it was pretty easy for him to just tear them apart. But when you see him fighting other characters, how was that balance done?
That was a very difficult balance because you know what his powers are, and it's stabbing and ripping and shredding people, and so we had to be judicious in staging. That was a real challenge to try and make sure that the character came off as who he is, but also knowing that it's on Saturday morning, what we can get away with. And like when he fought Sabretooth, a lot of it is close quarters. You see him slashing at each other, but there's never any puncture wounds and stuff because they were like running, they'd be rolling around like wrestlers or something like that. And so kicking each other off, flips. That's about what we could get away with on Saturday morning. That was a difficult thing to do, and sometimes I would have drawings that were done by artists that they drew him, slicing someone, and I'd have to take it out and restage it another way so that it could meet the broadcast standards and practices, because I know what would not get through, and so I had to be creative and making sure that nothing got through that would make the censors, the BSMP, would make their hair come on fire and stuff. But yeah, luckily we had robots that Wolverine could cut loose on and rip them to shreds, and so that's why we like the Sentinels and other robots.
Now the opening sequence. Oh, go ahead, Doug.
I was just going to ask, were you aware that the X-Men series continued recently? Marvel Comics brought back X-Men 92 as a comic book series, starting first digitally and then printing it, revisiting those characters, those storylines, and particularly that art style that was created for the show, and have continued it in print for the modern era.
I am aware of it. The guy Scott Koblish is a friend of mine, and I think he's one of the artists who drew it. So we're pretty good friends out here. So he gave me a heads up that it was coming out, and I really enjoyed it. He was having fun drawing it, and it was nice to see them do that. Because those characters are pretty much. I could almost say they were like the iconic versions that people have grown to love over the years. And I'm glad they were able to put out a book that kids wanted to read, and to bring back that nostalgia of those characters back then. No, I really liked it.
Another, and I talked to Larry about this in private a while back too, was that the opening sequence that is so, I mean, probably one could say probably the most memorable part about the series is the introduction to the show, which from the music to the sequences of all the characters being introduced at the beginning of the show was not originally like that. Is that correct, Larry? Like there was a completely alternative introduction to the show that you had done, correct?
Um, in terms of the opening for the X-Men, I started doing a version of it that wasn't quite there, and then so we talked to Will. Will did the first three images, the ship and Cyclops, and so that kind of put me on the path. And then from that point forward, I drew the rest of it, and yeah, that was the opening titles that you see today. Now, the other thing that most people don't know is that the opening theme music, that was I think it was the 15th take to get it to what you guys know today, but that there were like 14 other versions that were like rejected. And at the time, Saban, which was the company providing the music, got really pissed off because he's used to like maybe do 2 or 3 versions and that's it, and they just crap it out. And we were like, no, this isn't still good enough. This isn't good enough. This has to be changed. So it actually, went 15 versions to the final version that you guys know about, but it was a hard battle to get that version because he didn't understand, why are you doing this? Just put anything out there. Nobody cares. And we actually did care. But in his mind, he's made a fortune by just, doing whatever and dumping it out there and making a ton of money. But for us, we had the integrity for like, we're only gonna get 13 episodes of this, so we have to make this the best we could make it. And so we were like putting our not political, but our professional careers on the line by saying, look, no, we want it this way. We want this to happen. And so a lot of, we Margaret, myself, Will, we all were standing firm. We didn't really care if we got fired, but we had to stand up and make sure that we got the show on the air that we wanted. And so there were a lot of battles like this behind the scenes that nobody knew about but us in trying to get this thing on the air. And yeah, so that's one of many behind the scenes things that happen to get this sucker on the air. And God, we were so happy that it got a pickup, that it had an audience and people liked what we were doing. And luckily, once we got past the first season, all the little things I used to do to make the show better, nobody gave me any static. Nobody said, don't do this, Larry. Don't do this, Larry. They pretty much left me alone to be a creative person to make the show I wanted it to be for the first 4 years of the series.
Do you know why the Japanese version had a completely different introduction? And was that just common back in the days, just to have other countries do their own intros to the show, or was Japan special for making a new intro for the show? For
no, sometimes they would do something for their own culture, for their own audience. They would make up something, and when I saw it, I went, "Holy shit, that's really good!" When I saw that, I went, "Damn!" Like we have talked to these guys first in the first year, but like I said, the X-Men was not expected to last. So nobody had any expectations. Nobody wanted to spend the money. They thought we were all going to crash and burn. So we were kind of like a little orphan out there, and the little engine that did, we climbed that hill and we made it work.
Did you have any talks with the composer of the theme song or theme music? Because I believe it was Shuki Levy who, to tie it back to He-Man, did the He-Man theme as well as a lot of the various pieces of music on the cartoon.
No, I didn't have it. Peripherally, I didn't have it directly. It was mainly Will Mineo and Eric Lewall.
Okay.
They were like the pioneers to make sure they got the version they wanted on the air. I'd heard in early versions, but you didn't want to hear any of those. They were like pretty generic stuff.
Now, what about the Pride of the X-Men intro? Because I mean, to me, I thought that was pretty damn catchy myself. From the music to the action sequences in that. I mean, I thought that was very well done as well.
Yeah, I don't know who the music composer was on that one. I'd have to go IMDb like you guys and find out who that was. It might have been Saban again, but they pretty much were the go-to studio for getting music done at that time. But I could be wrong. I'm not sure yet. But I'm a fan of. I don't like a lot of lyrics in the titles. I like the music to tell the story, and but they wanted a sales tool basically to try and put it in the kids' minds. That's why X-Men Save the Day. We went, okay, we need to sell this. We need to get this out there in the world so people know who these characters are. So I went, yeah, that's cool. Let's billboard the characters so they can remember it, and I was on board with it.
Amazing.
Were there any particular characters that you really wanted to have on the show, but when you spoke earlier about having to try to pare things down, so you had 4 males, 4 females, whatever, were there particular characters that you really wanted to put on there, but you just didn't have the opportunity to bring them into the show?
Well, yeah, for me, it was like, the Nightcrawler and Colossus were the ones that I was sorry to see go. I understood why, but those are like fun characters that you could have a lot of fun with. We did it with Pride of the X-Men with Nightcrawler, to a certain degree also with Kitty Pryde. I know those two are ones that would have been fun to have into the series, but they had to call the members, so to speak. So that's how I got paired out. And Colossus's power is pretty much duplicated by Rogue, being both super strong. And Nightcrawler got called along with Kitty Pryde, and basically Kitty Pryde got replaced by Jubilee.
Right.
As a young kid's young superhero girl.
Now, was there any idea, because eventually Colossus shows up in the Unstoppable Juggernaut and Nightcrawler shows up in the episode Nightcrawler. Like, once you've introduced them, was there ever a point, like in a future season, we can incorporate them in a few occasional episodes as part of the roster, whereas instead of Rogue in this episode, Colossus is there to kind of fill that spot, and you could bring in Nightcrawler and rotate, Gambit out for an episode as part of the roster?
I would have loved that. I mean, that's one of the things we tried to get across, that we wanted to do that and bring some in, let some, leave or whatever. But yeah, I wanted that to happen. It didn't happen because of the stories as they got plotted out per year. Year 2 was the Sinister morph arc. And if we could incorporate the characters into that arc, that was the consideration. If they didn't fit into the story arc where we wanted to be at the end of the 13, then unfortunately, okay, we said, well, maybe next year we can figure out some arc and work them in. And so pretty much the story arc, the 13th story arc was, that was the key. And if we could make that work, then everything was fine. Yeah, I would have loved to have some of those characters in it almost in every episode, but it didn't work out that way. I'm gonna have to. Whoops! Oh, sorry about that.
Oh, no problem.
I gotta let me get this charger's not working as well as it should. I'll be about 30 seconds.
You're fine.
Right back. Okay.
How are we doing on time, Doug?
Well, I mean, we've been an hour, 20 minutes. And technically, we have 8 hours until YouTube shuts off the feed, but I don't want to sit in this chair for 8 hours.
I guess we can, because I still got a ton of questions. I could still ask him about the series along with some other stuff, so we could always because we don't want to keep Larry a very long time. Probably try and wrap it up with another question or two, or close out with some of the fan questions or anything else. Or
Yeah, I mean, we've pretty much been doing them as they've been coming in. So some of them I've just been typing and answering in the chat. But yeah, I think just go ahead, whatever questions that you have. Oh, except the Geek Reviews wants us to talk about his work on Care Bears, but we'll save that for the other.
We'll save that for a future
the next time. Yeah.
Bear 80s cartoon, because he will come back for that. So we will have him back for that one as well.
Yeah. So ask the ones you've been dying to ask here. We'll go with those.
I've got a pretty good meaty question, I think, that could go on for a bit. So I'll just ask that one there.
So anything else, guys, on YouTube? Anything else that you put in here? We'll save them for next time that we have them on here. But we're gonna cut it off at this point.
Yeah, we don't want to overstay our welcome with Larry here. We want to keep everybody wanting more as well. So if people are enjoying this one, then we'll have him back for a third visit. But,
Okay, guys, I think I found a better outlet. I was watching my phone as I'm talking to you. I thought it was charging, but it was going like 10%, 9%. I'm going.
Hang on, change your phone pretty quick. I've made that mistake several times myself.
And so I said, okay, I better find a better charger before this thing dies on me 100%. So right now, let's see. I got to. There it is. Okay, I'm gonna have to hold it for now on.
Right.
Okay.
Well, we didn't want to keep you much longer, so we were going to ask like one more good meaty question, then we were going to let you go, and because we didn't want to keep you longer than necessary, and we've been going for about an hour and a half. We don't want to inconvenience.
We don't want you sick of us. That's what we're saying. We don't want you.
Yeah, we don't want you to get. We want you to come back. We don't want you. Oh dear God, it's them again. So we want to kind of go out on a high note, like Seinfeld season 9, so to speak here.
Okay. I'm for that.
The last question, and this I've often wondered about this as well, especially with you being such an avid fan of X-Men. When you're adapting a particular storyline, and it's supposed to either go into a small one episode, or even if it's done over a series of episodes, like Phoenix Saga, which was pretty much spot on right out of the books. I mean, you go read Phoenix Saga. What you read is pretty much what's shown, in the series, because you were given a lot of episodes to do that full storyline, both Dark Phoenix and the Phoenix Saga. But what has to be taken into consideration when you're adapting a particular storyline? I feel like, okay, like with Days of Future Past, Bishop is given a much prominent role in that storyline. How do you decide, okay, we're going to cut this, we're going to change this, because they do it a lot in a lot of the superhero movies as well, where they will change. I mean, for a lot of fans of the characters and series and stories, you don't like to see a whole lot of great changes, and not that a whole lot were done in the series, but how do you decide what can be changed? What is it we must keep this? How do you decide all that when adapting a story?
Well, one of the nice things about the creative team is that we were all pretty much on the same page, and we pretty much all believe that you need to change as little as possible, because there's a reason why the books are successful. There's a reason why these characters work the way they do. And so you shouldn't be changing things arbitrarily just because you can. You should try and preserve what makes the character or the series work and put that on the screen. And to that degree, we all believe that. Now, the consideration for adapting basically is that, okay, we're moving from comics to cinema. And in cinema, it's not the same as comics. And so it's a different consideration as to how to tell the story. But the other thing is that we need to reach a huge audience that most do not know the mythology that the comic book reader would know. And so in adapting the stories, you try and make the story accessible to that larger audience, but all at the same time not try and discard and throw away what makes the characters and the stories work. And so it's a balancing act, but first and foremost, we always considered not to change as little as we had possibly could to make it work. And that's how we approached the series. That's how we approached all the characters. And that's how come the series is pretty much like the books, is that we had that reverence for what made everything work in the books, what made it fun to read, what made it exciting. And the fact that we were almost all of the creative people, we were all fans of the books. And so I used to tell my friends, that, I had, at the time, like 25, 30 years of Marvel mythology in my head, which was totally useless in life until I got a chance to work on the X-Men, until I got a chance to work on any of the Marvel properties. And then suddenly all of that trivia that I knew was quite essential in knowing how to fix and correct things that maybe the writers did, maybe the artists did, and I could steer the ship and made sure that it was on course to being as close to the books as possible. That's always been my philosophy, and at times, if I could, I would have either the artist would do it, or I would just change it and redraw stuff. But I would take things like from the Phoenix Saga. I think it's the part where they're on the moon fighting the Imperial Guard, and I had either I drew it, or I had someone else drew it. I had, okay, take this panel that John Byrne drew. We're going to animate that shot. We're going to animate this shot. I would take scenes from the books and have them animated into the show as cinema, so that you really got a taste that we were really trying to be truthful to the original stories we could. And so, I think it works well when you have people working on a show that actually like the show, that actually like the mythology, that they bring to it an intangible that makes the show work. And luckily it translated to an audience, a huge audience ratings. And so it kept us afloat and kept us in the business. But, that's the way I believe, cartoons should be. They should, you remember the source material and you adapt it for cinema. You just don't change it because you can. Change it because you have to, not because this will look cool because I thought it would be cool. It's like, no. Change it because you have to, but keep the original core material there because that's what people are expecting. And that's just me. And luckily, my other creative cohorts, we all believe the same thing. Myself, Will Mineo, Rick Holberg, Frank Bruner, Mark Lewis. God, I know I'm forgetting more people here. And the writers, Mark, Bob Skier, and others. Brooke Watchell. I'm mispronouncing his name probably, but yeah, that's how we all believe in storytelling. So that's how I approached adapting anything, especially the Marvel stuff, to television.
Which is why that show continues to still resonate with thousands and millions of fans all over the world, why they always look to that as probably the best interpretation of the X-Men, even above all the films they've done since 2000.
I'm glad that they responded to it, because we put our best foot forward and just hope that it didn't get stepped on. Everybody liked it. It's like, oh, great.
I think it's the one.
Go ahead.
I just think it's still continuing to step on any other competition. I mean, the movies have got a lot of good things, a lot of bad things, but I think overall the X-Men animated series, much like the Batman animated series, is arguably the best. The Batman, this X-Men series is the pinnacle of what. If you're going to introduce somebody to the X-Men outside a comic book, you need to show them the 90s animated series, because I think that's the tone, the dialogue, the action. It ages very, very well. There's nothing dated about the show, and your all's care and consideration to make sure that it's the best that it could be. It still continues to pay dividends to fans, and to we continue to thank everybody who worked on the show.
I'm glad you're being very kind about the animation, because uh, our budget for doing the animation was nowhere near as good as the Batman. I mean, they had an excellent budget. We had like a I don't know what you want to call it, but sometimes we'd have great episodes that would come back from overseas. Some of us like, well, okay, no, not so good. The one thing we had going that I think kept us going was we had great stories. We had great writers and good and excellent voice actors. Excuse me. And I think that was our strength, was that was the stories. Even if the animation didn't match it, at least we kept the stories interesting and compelling. And so it was, I know there were bad episodes animated, and some of it doesn't hold up, but the stories do.
You're probably just going to say that because you're a perfectionist about the X-Men, whereas we look at them like, oh boy, that looks so damn good. It's even though there's some errors here and there, all anime from He-Man to X-Men to Batman, they're all animation errors in every show. But
yeah,
much too hard on your there.
No, the show. The one thing I did that I'm really proud of for animation purposes is that I created the G.I. Joe movie opening intro.
Hell yeah!
And I really love what they did, because that was like the one time I drew something from scratch. And you draw stuff up, you send it overseas, you get 50% of what you wanted, because if they didn't have a budget for it, all the little small things and nuances, they would just not do. They would just, they would only do the big stuff and ignore all the other stuff in the storyboards. And when I did the movie intro, they actually did every damn thing I drew. I went, holy shit, look at that. They did this, they did that. This looks great. I mean, the pencil tests were fantastic. And I really, that's the one piece of animation I'm really proud of, because I had a theatrical budget behind that opening title. And that was so cool to see. And so
we're talking
go ahead.
Just like the Crimson Guard dropping down and punching the camera that's recording all the events going on, and just every small little detail in that, that's all you, and they brought it to life.
They brought it to life. I made the entire thing up from scratch. I had there was no script. They just told us, it was three of us, myself, Boyd Kirkland, and Frank Parr. Two other directors that went on to do fantastic. Frank Parr went on to direct the Gargoyles, and Boyd Kirkland went on to do directing, I think, the X-Men series after me.
Evolution.
Evolution, yeah. And so at the time, they gave us the assignment of, like, we need an intro to G.I. Joe. And so they said, okay, you guys three make up something. So I went home and I started thinking about it. At the time, it was about the time the Statue of Liberty was reaching one of those, anniversaries. So that gave me the clue, and I just started making up stuff. I basically had been working on G.I. Joe for like 4 years, whatever it was. I had I knew all the shots. I knew the characters, and so I just started drawing stuff and making stuff up, and that's where it came from. And I have all the Cobra people, and coming down thousands of balloons, and they drew thousands of balloons. I went, oh shit, they drew it all. Look at that. And I tried to showcase characters that normally don't get their time on the screen. I put all the characters, obscure characters, and put them in, made sure they were almost in every shot. Somebody new, some new G.I. Joe character that doesn't regularly get seen. And that was the one piece of animation. Oh man, I really enjoyed that. That was really good. So I enjoyed all the
good moments in that opening sequence.
I'm sorry?
I said you gave Snake Eyes some very good moments in the opening sequence.
Yeah. I had some fun with it, and literally everything in that opening title it was like a culmination of all the experience I had working in the business, and all of the anime inspired films I had seen up to that point. and just tried to let my imagination. Everything was a stream of consciousness. What you saw there, I was drawing stuff and didn't even know what I was going to draw next. It just that's how it was created.
I certainly hope you realize the massive box of questions that just you've really unleashed now, because it's coming. So we definitely want to save that for our next interview. So
Okay.
we just like to go ahead and take this time to wrap up and graciously thank you for devoting your time to talking about X-Men, and look forward to another installment of G.I. Joe and Captain Planet and various other cartoon questions we can ask you.
And Care Bears, apparently. YouTube wants us to talk about Care Bears.
Oh yeah, I did a whole season of Care Bears, and I think 3 direct-to-video movies.
Wow. Well, Doug, you got anything to add here before we let Larry go?
No, I just wanted to, thank you again for coming and doing the show. We, really enjoy having you here. Your mind is just this fountain of knowledge that we're trying to pick clean and absorb as much as we can. Everybody out there who watched this, thanks for watching. Don't forget to go to popculturenetwork.com for more podcasts and great stuff that we have for you. And even tonight, later on tonight, we'll have another live episode as we do the Fans of Power podcast will be coming. So Tyler is also a part of that. So if you enjoyed hearing his soothing tones, you can check that out later tonight. But once again, Larry, thank you so much for being on the show. We've enjoyed it so much. And again, thanks everybody for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Larry. We'll be in touch for the next round of
okay. Thank you.